podcast about comics. A podcast about comics.
Welcome back to another episode of a podcast about comics. This is your boy on remote location from my man's man cave. My man between the panels, we've been trying to get him to go ahead and make another debut. We've been missing him in the lair, so we're on site here with him, and we're going to chop it up today and talk all things Marvel and just nerd stuff. All right, how you feeling to be here today, brother?
Feeling good, man. It's been a while. Looking forward to it.
Good. One of the things I've been asking, like, a lot of my nerd friends, my colleagues, a lot of people that I chop it up with when it comes to pop culture, Disney Plus, what we got in 2021 is...
We got a lot.
We got 5 different shows coming out of the Marvel canon, right? And I've been asking them to chop it up. So give me from your worst to your best. And
Worst to
why.
best.
So the one you love, because all of them were great. We love them all, right?
Yeah, that's hard. They were all really great in their own right. So let's start off with saying that.
Okay.
Man. So are we including the What If series in there for sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
All the Disney Plus under Marvel.
All Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I know it just finished, and I know it was near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and I am going to acknowledge that it did. I'm just going to say, first off, we're going to start with worst, because bad news first, right? Get that out of the way.
Yeah.
As much as I did love it, and it did give a good send-off to Natasha, and there was a lot of good things, my personal worst, and it's hard to say it because there was a lot of good things in it, I'm going to have to say was Hawkeye.
Okay.
And the reason being, there was just so many things I think that could have just been done a little bit better, and every single time I was just like, oh, they just missed on that note. Oh, they just missed on that note.
Okay.
And especially when it came to the build-up that they had for Kingpin, and just because the whole entire Daredevil series going back to the Netflix series was such a near and dear series to close into my heart. Daredevil in general, Kingpin in general, just street level characters. I mean, going down. I mean, I'm wearing Moon Knight for a reason here, so.
Yeah.
But I just feel like there's a big miss because it was just such a build up, and then what we got, I felt just didn't hit the mark. No pun intended there with the Hawkeye.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just of the series and what it could have been. And the story it told with Clint, I liked how we saw the actual struggle of the one Avenger that is truly just a human Avenger. He doesn't have any superpowers. He doesn't have anything special about him. He's not a millionaire. He truly is just a great marksman. And it was good to see that struggle. It was good to see that struggle post-blip. Mm-hmm. See the struggle he had to deal with his family. See the struggle he had to deal with Natasha. Passing and still having that mark on him and everything with Yelena and everything that came into play. But I just felt like it was rushed.
Really?
I really did.
Okay.
I felt like that series, and I feel like that's not a knock against everything on Disney Plus, but it is, I think, a knock against everything that they've been doing. Is it just felt like if you could throw, and I think we've had this conversation, you and I, off camera a few times, if they could throw in a couple more episodes to each of these series, I feel like you could just tell the story a little bit more. And again, you're telling me to take some of the best content that has come out in years, let alone Marvel. I mean, if you look around this room, there's a lot more Marvel in here than there is DC, so that's definitely my fandom. But of the series that came out, I would have to definitely say Hawkeye would be lowest on the most amazing totem pole of 2021 content to come out on Disney Plus.
Okay.
And that's hard for me to do because it was really, 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 really freaking good.
Yeah.
So
it was.
It's not me saying it's bad. It's just you told me to rank it against the other ones.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay.
I'm curious to see what you think about that because I don't think I've thrown that your way.
No.
And I think you're having like a visceral reaction as I'm telling you this right now.
I'm trying to process because I'm like, whoa, I was not expecting this.
I think the last time we got together, we were still watching the series, and I don't think we had the discussion.
What were we? No, we were finishing up.
The finale, I think, was just airing the last time we were talking, or it was like the week of.
Was it?
But regardless, I'm curious to see what you think.
Okay. After that, we're going up to best. I'm gonna give you mine.
We're gonna go in order. Okay, I thought we were gonna throw some feedback here.
Well, cause I'm gonna break down why I thought I was gonna give mine as well.
Okay.
Okay, my fifth worst was What If.
Okay.
Or my least favorite was What If.
See, mine was close for it to being What If.
Okay.
But the only reason it wasn't What If, being that you're about to break into What If, the only reason it wasn't What If is because it was such a leap and such, I think, a risk for Disney Plus and just Marvel in general to do What If. Like, think about it. Like,
and execute it right.
And execute it right. How many times do you think it's going to be okay for... I mean, when it comes down to it, it was almost... it was an animated series, so kids were throwing on this show and watching the Avengers get slaughtered. Like, and it being okay. A lot of people were thinking, oh, I'm going to throw this on. This is going to be like a great heartfelt show. And, I mean, the nod to Chadwick alone was so well done. And just to see him take on these roles that you wouldn't expect him. I mean, you were expecting to see Tchallabp, but in such a different role.
And then the little things that he would say.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. So
death is not the end, right? As long as you carry them with you, they live on.
And knowing he was doing this with everything he was already facing and dealing with, and then just the overall arc. I mean, granted, we didn't get the Gamora episode. Spoiler alert, in case you have not watched the What If series. What are you doing at this point?
At this point, right?
But there was just so many things that go back. I guess that had a personal tie to things that I enjoyed in my childhood. Because the What If series, if you look behind here, there's a bunch of comic books. What If series was one of my favorites going back. It always tested what if, literally, if something were to happen not in the right succession and what would be the ripple effect. And I just thought it was done so well in such a short time span where Hawkeye just didn't nail it. And like between those two, it was really hard. I mean, you told me to rank again some of the greatest content possible and knock one down a peg. So that was why I had to put Hawkeye right behind What If, because ultimately that last episode of What If was just so good. It was so good. And what it set up and what it's going to mean. And we already seen in Spider-Man, the most recent Spider-Man film.
Spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen Spider-Man.
Again, what are you doing if you haven't seen Spider-Man?
If you haven't seen it at this point, I think you need to just cut it off.
It's the largest grossing film of all time, if I'm not mistaken, at this point. So I think the world has seen Spider-Man, and if you haven't, then...
I think a few days ago, it just took down Black Panther's record.
So there you go. At this point, if you haven't seen it, you've literally been under a rock, apparently. So, but with that being said, what it set up with having Stephen Strange being able to fight the Shimagora, like what is going to happen with that, and the setup that's in What If from that, like I don't know, it just put so many pieces in play that Hawkeye didn't do. Like Hawkeye was good, but it didn't shift these cosmic pieces into play. The Watcher was in there, like. So that's the only reason. I think there was just a lot larger dominoes falling in What If. That to me just made my nerd brain happier than in Hawkeye. And then ultimately that fight at the end of Kate Bishop and Kingpin, it kind of hurt my soul because my boy Kingpin was getting thrown around.
That was one of the things that I hated the most about Hawkeye was Kate Bishop would never do that to Fisk. Right?
Exactly.
And I understand what Marvel was trying to do. And I mentioned this to Vet when I was talking to Vet. I said, I just don't see Kate Bishop taking down the Kingpin.
Especially right after she just came into her own, right? This is a coming into her own series. This isn't Kate Bishop weather-worn to the degree that Clint was,
This is still milk on the breath, wet behind the ears, kind of Kate Bishop.
This is Kate just finally seeing Clint do his thing and get, like you said, get her feathers a little a little
dirty,
flustered,
yeah,
a little dirty, and then all of a sudden Kingpin
and that's who she's
rolls
taking
in, and she's like, "Oh, I got this." And I know there was the nod of doing the flick and hitting it, and then the significance of it actually being the brooches. Like, I get that, like.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you can't just knock him out that quickly.
Not that quickly. But here's something that Vet pointed out to me, right? She says, but did she though?
Well, we know he's not. Right?
Because it comes off to us like she took him down, but she clearly didn't take him down.
We know he's not, granted.
Yeah, right?
Because...
But I have a whole different feeling about Hawkeye, though. And I'll explain when I explain why I ranked it like that.
Okay.
For me, I felt like my least favorite was What If because it was just that. It was what if.
Okay.
Right? And because we've read What If throughout the many decades that we've got the runs from the 70s and the 80s and all of those, right? We have seen all these different stories and we get a feel of that when we see What If. We get the nod with Chadwick and all that and it's beautifully done. But it's just that. What if, right? So for me, that got the lowest ranking for me. For my fourth ranking, going upwards to best, I gave Loki.
Interesting.
Now you give me why, or you want me to give you?
No, I want to hear yours first. I'm having the same shock reaction right now.
I know you are.
Because I would never thought you would put it that low.
And when I literally broke it down, I was like, it was very hard, right? But it was little things why I ranked them in that order. Okay. And I thought Loki was phenomenal. And we got to see a glimpse of the big bad to come, right?
Oh, yeah.
I love the fact that we got variants. We got the TVA, we got the multiverse introduction, right? And we see what happens at the end with He Who Remains, right? The only one that remains is He Who Remains.
And not even the worst one yet. So
we got to see like smack dab in your face versions of 616, right? And we got to hear how they were talking about for Lokis are survivors, right? And to see all that, to witness them bringing Alioth from the comic book to the screen, right? Because we seen Alioth in the comics, that's just this poofy cloud, right? And we actually got to see Alioth in the show. When you are giving me this kind of content, it wows me, and it was great.
What about classic Loki?
I loved every element of that.
Phenomenal.
But I still rank the others higher because I were looking at the multiple moving pieces that was moving and how it tied together. And I felt like if you're going to give me, because keep in mind, every story we've gotten, there were little stories plugged from different places out of the comic books to give me one tapestry of art. Right? So we got this white canvas. And I felt like they did a great job with Loki, right? Because we got the TVA, right? And I remember when we first saw the trailer of Loki, which came out Super Bowl the year before, right? I remember saying to some of my friends, "Oh, the TVA," and none of them know what the TVA was, right? At least some of my new fan friends didn't know, right? So, and then I said it to you, and you was like, TVA, I know. And the first thing we was like, Kang. Can't have a TVA without Kang.
Yep.
Right? And I remember saying it to Dr. Law, and he's like, yep. You know, all these big nerd friends that I have that's into pop culture and comics, that have been reading comics as many years as I have, we all knew what the TVA was, right? So we saw those things coming, and we automatically said, okay, if this thing line up with this to this to this to this, we must be getting this. And if we get that, that would be great, but is it too early to get that? And then we got that, right? But we got a version where he is telling you, listen, my variants are worse than I am. But I know you're going to kill me, right? The multiverse is going to go crazy. We're going to break into a wall, right? And we're going to be right back here again. And then at the end, we watch it happen, right? And it was beautifully done, but I don't feel like it was that strong as the others and why I chose.
Okay.
So I gave it number 4. Give me your number 4.
Okay. So, number 4. If we're so you went What If
Is 5.
then Loki.
Is 4.
So I actually already kind of stumbled into 4.
Okay.
Because I went Hawkeye, then What If.
Then What If. Okay.
So, yeah.
So we got your 4.
So that would be my number 4.
Okay. Give me your number 3.
So then my number 3 would have been Loki.
Okay. Okay.
And Loki surprised me. Because I think I told you this off camera at one point. It was Loki, I went into it thinking it was going to be a Tom Hiddleston, like, fanboy, fangirl show. Yeah. Because I know, for one, he loves the role, and I think that's awesome for one thing. Like, if you get to be cast in a Marvel show of any nature, I would probably be like, yes, cast me in everything possible, because I want to continue to be whatever character it may be. But I just didn't think there was going to be enough substance there. But when we found out the TVA was going to be there, I was like, oh, this could open up a lot of possibilities.
We got Mobius, Mobius.
Exactly. We got Mobius, we got Kang, and then I got excited. I know we had this conversation. We even had it when I think last time we had that big, pretty much Disney Plus, let's try to guess what's going to happen with the pretty much trajectory of these shows last time. We were saying, well, if we're going to get Kang, this means which versions of Kang we're going to get. And then that means at some point he's going to go back in time, and we might go get Ensabanur, and this might set up mutants, and then that's where I think we all freaked out, and we're like, oh, we're going to get X-Men. Yeah. And I think at this point we know we're going to get X-Men.
We have to.
You know, those predictions we had back in the day, you heard them first here.
Yeah, and we're seeing them pan out.
You know, we're seeing them pan out. So I think that's where I had put Loki at 3, because it surprised me in a lot of good ways.
Okay.
But it wasn't good enough to, chip those top 2 that we're going to get to next.
Okay.
But yeah, Loki was a really good surprise ride.
Okay.
I know, seeing that we haven't hit Hawkeye in your rankings, it definitely peaked a lot higher.
Yeah. And I'm gonna really. I'm
curious.
gonna flip you upside down now.
I'm curious. Yeah. No, I'm really curious.
So, Loki's your number 3.
Yeah,
okay.
Loki's definitely 3.
My number 3 is WandaVision.
Okay.
The reason why I gave WandaVision number 3, as spectacular as it was, and this is why I felt like it was spectacular, right? We got to see Wanda Maximoff become the Scarlet Witch, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember way back when we did Rumors and Confirmations. I think we did that in 2019 when we did Rumors and Confirmations. I remember me, you, Codename, Comet, and Kitano was sitting at a table, and we were talking about all these things. And back then, some of them were theories, some of them were rumors. We didn't even know yet, but we were saying, hey, if this works, it'll make sense to go here. And I remember saying, I believe in WandaVision, it's going to end with her becoming the Scarlet Witch, right? And we got to see her become the Scarlet Witch. The way they executed her becoming the Scarlet Witch. They gave us her back story, right? And it take her to go through that journey. And I've been saying this a long time. In everything that Wanda had been in before, Wanda was the catalyst that drove it, right? And it didn't even focus on her, but it focused on her. So the first time we see them, even though we get to see them in a post-credit, whatever first, the first time we get to see her is in Age of Ultron. And her and her brother, is the catalyst behind the Avengers, them having to stop them in Ultron. And in the midst of the story, they switch sides. The brother dies, she lives, and she joins the Avengers, right? Then in Civil War, she tries to save Captain America. And then once again, she's the catalyst behind everything that's driven, because her trying to do whatever, not being able to control her power and so on, she lost control and the explosion went off and people died. So they trying to keep on house arrest. Captain America is like, hey, this is wrong. She's a kid. What are you doing? Right? And again, she's the catalyst there that's driving the Civil War. Right? It ends with her getting arrested, but Cap came and he liberates her and Falcon.
Falcon.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And they go off and do secret missions or whatever, right? Clint is left behind. Scott is left behind. They get put on house arrest with the ankle monitor, whatever, right? They deal with their stuff. But again, Wanda's in hiding. In Infinity War, her and her boyfriend just want to be together.
Mm-hmm.
Her and Vision want to be together,
Mm-hmm.
right? They can't because now the children of Thanos is after them for the stone in Vision's head,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they go to Wakanda, and while she's in Wakanda, everybody get to see her really flex her abilities,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's on the field, she comes down, boom, does this, saves the day for the brief moment. But now her power is the only thing that can kill Vision or take the stone, remove the stone so Thanos can't get it. Time Stone, reverse that. So she now has to watch the man she loves die twice.
Mm-hmm.
By her hands and by this Titan's hand,
Mm-hmm.
right? She comes back at the end of Endgame to be the only one that could honestly go toe-to-toe and probably beat Thanos, right? But she gets cut down because fire is rained from above, right? So we watch all these things happen, right? But we are not processing the fact that she still is without her dude. And it's in WandaVision where, you know, because she grew up and we saw what was happening with her as a child and, you know, these old TV shows where she learned to speak English and all of these things is what grounded her. So in the midst of her grief, when she causes what to happen in Westview, right? In that moment, her grief created an alternate reality. And her grief is caused by the magic in her that's awoken by chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And Agatha points all of this out, and she's like, your prophecy, or you are prophesied it in the Darkhold.
Mm-hmm.
So now we not only get Wanda, but we get an introduction of the MCU's Darkhold.
Yep.
And where the MCU Darkhold is concerned, you have all these mythical, godlike, dark creatures that are housed and talked about in the Darkhold. The birth of the vampires is in the Darkhold.
Yep.
And when you start thinking about that, right? And then we see the things that's coming down the line. For those who haven't watched Eternals, go watch Eternals.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, post-credit scene.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we get to see, or we get to hear,
We get to hear.
right? The voice of Blade.
Yep.
Talking to Dane Whitman, who becomes the Black Knight. Right?
Yep.
So, in all of these things, and again, Marvel is over here playing chess. And they setting up these pieces, and we all know they play the long game. Right?
Very long game.
But as great as that was the first time we got to see what the Blip back looked like.
Yep.
Right? First time we got to see it. So we were like, oh wow, and it blew our minds, right? But there were still elements that were missing out of there, you know? And I felt like that's why I gave WandaVision my number 3.
Okay.
You give me your number, you gave me your number 3,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. Number 2.
Number 2.
Okay. You want to go first? Why don't we go first?
Well, I mean,
I'm going to let you go first because mine is going to shock you. But go ahead.
at this point, I only got 2 left to choose from, right?
Yeah.
I have WandaVision and I have Captain America
And
Falcon Winter Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
So, my number 2 is WandaVision.
Okay.
And I think it speaks volumes because, for one, it was the first show right out the gate on Disney Plus, right?
It was, yes.
It surprised, I think, a lot of people because it was so different.
Yes.
And because it was so different, it frustrated a lot of people. I think a lot of people were expecting, I'm going to put on this show, and it's going to be an hour-long MCU film that I get to watch each week, and it's going to make a lot of sense, and it's going to have...
superheroes fight and
They're
blow
going
up
to
stuff.
fight, and Wanda's going to come in, and Vision, and they're just going to beat stuff up, and I'm going to be able to watch this, and it's going to make sense, and oh my god, what am I watching? This is a 1950s show.
Yeah, this is opposite.
And
I don't
nothing
understand.
is happening.
Yeah,
I don't understand
anything.
it. But meanwhile, slowly in each episode, there is just a slight blip or a glitch, and it's just disseminating and breaking down, and you have to sit there and wait for everything to talk about a long game, and Marvel doing a long game.
I think out of the shows, WandaVision was the best long game.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it was the most intelligently and most sophisticated and I think probably thought-provoking show of all of them. Next to my number one that I'm going to. Obviously, at this point, you can figure out what my number one is, but...
and I definitely, me and you have the same number one. I definitely felt each show had a different journey.
It did.
And I felt Wanda's journey was a little bit different from my next journey, right? And I give my number 2 to Hawkeye. Okay? And everybody thinks that the show is Kate Bishop's show. But it's the journey of Hawkeye, right? Coming to terms with losing Natasha, right? Going through the motions of losing his hearing, right? What I loved beautifully about Hawkeye was we got the Matt Fraction run, where he takes Kate Bishop under his wing, right? And there was so much in the show where it was like copy to paste. They changed some of the wording and they changed some of the contrast in there. The banter about boomerang arrows, all of that is out of that run, right? We got to see Lucky, the one-eyed pizza dog. We got to see the Tracksuit Mafia. I remember before the show started, myself and Katana was talking about the show, about who's the possible bad guy, big bad guy. And I said, Wilson Fisk. And he was like, why Fisk? We haven't seen Fisk since the Netflix series, right? I don't think it's going to be. I said, it has to be Fisk. There was a rumor floating around many months out, and then they confirmed, right, that Alaqua Cox was going to be in the Hawkeye series as Maya Lopez, right? When D23 came out 2 months before they premiered Hawkeye, there was a show called Echo. And I said to Katano, I said, if there's going to be a show called Echo, Hawkeye, it is going to have many moving pieces, and one of them is going to be Maya's story. Right? And a lot of people had seen her and don't even realize that she's going to become Echo. And I said, if they are going to be telling an Echo story, which they are more than likely going to build to, the big bad has to be Kingpin.
Exactly. Because it sets up her long game of having to deal with Kingpin.
Absolutely. The only difference was, instead of Hawkeye saying, your boss hired me or tipped me off about your dad, why I killed your dad in the mix, right? The only difference was that in the comics, Daredevil is the one who tells her. But I didn't like the whole Kate Bishop thing, and that, that was a driving sore spot for me, right? I love the fact that we got to see Yelena again in a different atmosphere again, and now she has a different purpose, right? But it's in the craziness of Hawkeye that we realize that when Natasha beat Clint to sacrifice herself, she was not just fighting to bring his family back for him, but her sister back. Because she knew her sister had disappeared, got dusted away as well. So it's in that moment where she's sitting there talking to Clint, and she does the whistle about to kill him, and he whistles back. And now Clint have to tell her, she was my best friend. She told me everything. And because she was my best friend, and we have had these conversations, is why I wouldn't have let her just die. Right? But I wanted to sacrifice myself. And you know her, she have to win. She always do. So she had to be better than me, and she beat me, and she killed herself. And there's nothing we can do. And it's in that moment that you get to see the clarity behind of why Natasha was like, I have to do this. And for me, that, along with the banter of Kate Bishop and Yelena, right? Where we get to see another element, or the passing of the torches, while they're still buddy cop between the other Black Widow and the new Hawkeye, right?
The macaroni conversation?
The macaroni conversation. Like all these things. And then she says to her, when she gets up to leave, she says, thank you for girls' night. And it's like, it's only in that moment, like, when you go back and you watch Avengers 1 and the banter between Hawkeye and Hawkeye and Black Widow after she kind of kicked him and snapped him back or whatever, and they sitting there talking about he's going to put an arrow in Loki's eye or whatever, and they talking, and you realize, yeah, there's a very close bond here between these two characters, and you watching it formulate over here.
I did think one of the coolest moments in the show was the exchange between Clint and Kate, where Clint says to Kate, the most important shot I took was a shot I never took.
Yeah.
And then how in that same exact episode she ends up not taking the shot on Yelena, which pretty much sets up the next mantle for both of them, right? And like, I feel like that is probably overlooked by most fans who were just watching it and didn't see that. So yes, I do agree there were beautiful moments, and I know I've ranked it so low.
Yeah. Believe it or not,
I have a question for you. See, now we're talking about it.
Okay.
Because it bothered me. Well, how did you feel about the scene where they were just firing off every trick arrow after every trick arrow, continuously for what felt like forever?
I love the fact that, first of all, we got to see...
I like the PIM technology. I like the Stark technology. I liked everything leading up until that scene. But how did you actually feel about that scene? Because I'm not talking about the Yelena and Clint scene, because that was beautiful, and I will give the nod to that. I'm talking about the actual fight scene, which was supposed to be like the grand hurrah, because I'll have my opinion after yours. Okay. I'm curious.
I felt that was rushed a little bit.
Okay.
That was very rushed, right?
Okay.
I love the fact that they had trick arrows, and anybody who have followed Clint, aka Hawkeye, in the comics knows that he has a lot of trick arrows.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So seeing those trick arrows and how they executed them on the screen I thought was beautifully done. However, that whole scene where they pop in all these arrows, and it's supposed to be a while that they pop in these arrows, but it's really like only like 45 seconds to a minute. It was very rushed.
And I also thought, okay, so I get it. You guys are expert marksmen, but you're also literally not covered whatsoever. You're not moving, and you're just standing in the same spot. I thought they could have been using the trick arrows while still maybe moving through a scene of some nature, showing how they are agile, because most of the time when they're fighting, I mean, I've seen Clint do it plenty of times with Natasha. They're moving through some sort of scape of some nature. They're in a city. Yeah. They could have been using these trick arrows off of different not cliff tops, but they're in the city. Skyscraper tops or building tops of some nature. I don't know. I just felt like it was like, okay, I get it. You're in this very iconic situation in New York where you have the Christmas tree and you're in that picturesque scene in New York City, but I just felt it was almost too gimmicky in my opinion. And that last episode, I think that's what did it for me. I loved everything about Hawkeye, and then the last episode really made me just go, oh. And I think that's what did it for me, because I would have put this whole series that much further up the ladder on this ranking system.
These things.
If I had these things probably executed just a little bit better, because I was like, oh my god. When they previewed Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, the previous episode, I was like, mind freaking blown. Here we go. Like, this is going to be epic. And then when I started seeing the technology, the PIM arrow tips, and them building, I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be epic. And then it just all happened.
If they had given me 15 minutes solid of popping arrows and doing a lot of stuff
through something else, so I don't know.
I think because of the time frame that they had, I think a lot of things got cut and they had to squeeze it in.
Again.
And because they did that, they rushed that.
Yeah. So that was my personal qualm. And now looking at it, I had to be that last episode, I think, is what did it for me, because everything else, I know you and I were going back and forth plenty of times, like, oh man, that last episode, what they've been doing for Natasha's story, and I hate for all those fans of the Black Widow movie, I felt like this did way more justice
to
for
the Black Widow
Natasha
story,
and the Black Widow story than the Black Widow movie did.
Yeah.
And that speaks volumes for it, but it just felt like it fell so short. It's like running this amazing marathon, and they just was like, yeah, that's the finish line.
Definitely,
I'm done.
Definitely,
I don't know. It just fell short for me.
Definitely, the last episode fell a little short. But I think because of the build-up and all the things that we saw in there, it still pushed it to number 2 for me.
Okay.
Even though we start off with the Matt Fraction run, right? The show ends with the family business run.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
right?
he is...
even down to exactly what Kingpin
was
was
gonna say,
wearing.
Kingpin's attire. He had the Hawaiian shirt.
Hawaiian shirt.
Which, as goofy it kind of looked, I was like, oh, I know what they're doing with that.
Yeah,
It was a little goofy.
And there was a lot of guys in the forum that was like, oh man, Kingpin would never wear that.
Like,
and I'm like, no.
That's cover art. So.
Yeah. You know, shout out to my man Harlock19, my man Randy, aka Kingpin. Randy did that version of Kingpin. He cosplayed that version years ago. And it's because he's such a true fan of Wilson Fisk that, you know, he embodies Fisk in the way he looks, the way he dresses, and he has them all. And
you have to have all the wardrobe.
When I saw that, the first thing I did was I thought of Randy.
Yeah.
And Randy posted a picture that he had years ago. Like, yo, I did it first. And I'm like, respect.
Yeah,
because you're the OG Fisk.
Exactly,
you know?
Exactly.
So I felt like they took that right out of the book. Even with the confrontation that ended with Maya.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To where she pops him in the face. She's the one that shoots him in the face. Now, granted, we couldn't see that because it was Disney Plus.
Right.
Right? But for the readers out there.
Speaking of which, though, how do you think that confrontation would have gone down if this took place in the Netflix universe?
Oh, he would have got popped. We would have seen some splatter. Because remember, in the comics, after that, he loses his vision.
Yeah.
Right? But then he goes and he rehabilitates and he goes to China or Japan. And he comes back, he got the sword and he just...
cutting.
And he retakes his mantle as the king of New York.
How would you think the conversation of Kate's mom talking to Kingpin would have went down on the Netflix series?
God. First of all, I think he would have took her head and put her head through the table.
Yeah.
First of all.
Right?
But I think she also has a purpose in all of this. I believe Kate's mom is Madame Mask.
You think so?
I think so. Kate Nemesis ends up becoming Madame Mask, right? Mm-hmm. But it's just in the comics, it's not her mom, because her mom is actually the one who gets killed and she's raised by her dad.
Right.
Right? But I believe they are setting all of this up, right? That they're going to do something later on with her, and she will have to deal with her mom, and her mom is Madame Mask.
Okay.
That's what I'm seeing. I could be wrong, but if I'm not wrong, you heard it here first.
Right here.
So seeing all of that, like it end with the whole family business run with Maya and everything, and then the banter at the end when they burn the Ronin suit, and she's trying to get her name, and just like in the comics where she's trying to pick her name, and Hawkeye gives her the name.
Gives her Hawkeye, yeah.
And the show ends with him walking away saying, "I have an idea," and it goes off. I'm like, boom, and all of those reasons why I push it to my number 2 spot.
Okay.
I felt like it was genius the way they executed it. There was some missed moments too. But I felt like there were also missed moments in my number 1.
Okay.
And your number 1.
Before we hop to the number 1, I want to touch on my number 2 a little bit more.
Okay.
What I really did enjoy about WandaVision 2 was just some of the side characters that we got to see. Just their storylines develop. I mean, for one, we got to see Wanda's kids.
Billy and Tommy, and we know they're coming back.
And we see all sprinkled throughout pretty much all these Disney Plus shows, little nods to other young Avengers and characters coming up.
Yeah.
The one thing that I thought we were going to see, because it kind of felt like it was setting up, was a little House of M, maybe a little Mephisto.
Marvel plays the long game.
It does play the long game.
Right? So there was a lot of people out there who was very upset.
I wasn't upset. I just was like, man, this is really setting up to be House of M, right?
House of M, right? And we thought we were going to get Mephisto in WandaVision. We didn't. But here's the question. Did we not, though? We could have.
We could have.
He could be right in the mix, and we just don't know.
This is true. Because a lot of people thought Agatha was Mephisto, right? Like, that kind of made it, like, the obvious one.
Or that she's working for Mephisto.
Or working for, right? So, I thought that was fantastic. And to your point, too, just to see the Darkhold come back into play, because it was done in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was done really well in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I thought that season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was phenomenal. It was probably one of the best ones. But to see it done to this degree and to see it come back up and become MCU canon, and that scene we see her just...
It's way more darker, too.
Yeah, and now...
Like, the way the Darkhold really is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now we see her sitting there just studying in her little cabin.
And showing just how truly powerful she is. Because people like Doctor Strange, when they astral project, their body have to be at rest.
Right.
She's walking around sipping coffee or tea or whatever.
Doing her thing, right?
In the mountains, and while she, her astral projection is just sitting there, wheeling stuff and studying the books.
So do you think, because this is something I'm personally speculating, at that point, do you think where she's got the Darkhold and she is officially... Well, she hears her kids, but she officially becomes the Scarlet Witch, that's a Nexus level event in itself.
Yeah.
And that is a branch in itself, because at that point...
I'm going to point something out which I don't know if you know.
Okay, go ahead.
So I actually sat the episode of Loki and WandaVision side by side.
Okay.
And ran them together.
Okay.
And the moment that she embraces everything and she harnesses her true power and takes everything from Agatha, is at that moment that Immortus, he's talking and he stops and he's like, now I don't know the potential of what's going to happen for me to write it now. Something had just changed. This is right before Sylvie and Loki gets into the fight.
Now that is interesting. I have not seen that.
And Wanda is a Nexus being.
Exactly.
Right? Immortus, a.k.a. Kang the Conqueror, is the Nexus being. As a matter of fact, the city that he houses his stuff is in something Cropolis. What is it called? Oh my gosh, I cannot remember what the name of the Cropolis is, but it's the micro city that's in the Nexus realm where time doesn't coincide with the time around us. So if he is a Nexus being that could pass through this Nexus point and can create a city and dwell there, right? So the moment that Wanda embraces herself and becomes that true Nexus being, everything shifts.
Okay.
Right? So I believe it's in that moment that all of that, like, he literally, like, realizes that just happened. Because remember, Immortus is he who remains.
Right. And at that point, he can't see what's going to happen next anymore.
Nope. And he then now does what he does to get Loki and Sylvie at each other's necks. And they fight, and boom, she kills him.
And do we give the viewers a little spoiler in that Scarlet Witch and Steven are no longer on the same level there?
Oh, they are very much no longer on the same level.
Because I don't think people understand the level where Scarlet Witch is now in comparison to what they've seen.
Even these new fans who have watched WandaVision and love WandaVision, and oh man, Scarlet Witch, blah, 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 they still haven't seen her cut up yet. They still have not. And I believe in Multiverse of Madness, we will see her cut up. I would not be surprised if Multiverse of Madness ends, one, with her having her 2 kids. 2, we now have mutants. Because I believe we're going to get to see a reverse House of M scenario, but reverse.
Okay.
Right? Where she probably might utter these words or whatever and speak it into existence, and poof, it's now there. But I honestly, truly do not believe that the general audience have any idea of how strong the Scarlet Witch truly is.
Yeah.
And I believe we're going to see that. Yeah.
So, I just had to touch a couple notes on that because... That show, like I said, it
was amazing.
It was absolutely amazing.
It was amazing.
And to see how many people were so frustrated by it kind of, like, looking back at it, just makes me laugh because
we also got the introduction of Monica Rambeau.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And people started putting 2 and 2 together and realized, oh, hey, that's the little girl from Captain Marvel. In the comics, Monica Rambeau is the first Miss Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And then Carol Danvers comes way later.
Yep.
I believe in the Marvels, we're going to get all of them. I believe we're going to get Carol Danvers, a.k.a. Captain Marvel. We're going to have Monica Rambeau, a.k.a. the original Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, and Photon.
Photon, yeah.
And I believe she's going to take her mom's name, because her mom's name in the MCU, her call sign was Photon.
Mm-hmm. Which we saw a glimpse of her power, which how awesome was that?
Which
scene?
I didn't really, that was one of the things that I hated about Captain Marvel. Her call sign on the plane was, on the jet, was Avenger, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Her call sign is Warbird.
Right. Yeah. You know, you can't have it all.
You can't. You can't.
That's a whole different episode I'll have to make, because I know you did not like that film. And and you did not like her. Are we still not on Team Brie yet?
We're not. Listen,
man.
and again, she's an amazing actress. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to blame the director.
I feel like...
Or the writer.
I feel like she's going to be redeemed coming up here.
Maybe.
And
I hope that she is. Just because of the way that they executed the character.
Yeah.
She just seemed extremely flat to me.
Yeah.
Right? Where she was one of like the first females out of the Marvel universe when I was reading comics that I just gravitated to.
Fair enough. Yeah.
You know? I mean, first of all, there's the love of my life, Aurora Monroe.
Yeah.
Right?
As we know. Yeah.
As we know.
Yeah.
And then Miss Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and she was just, this is back before Ro got a hold of her, when she was just kicking butt.
Yeah.
You know, but then, yeah, Brie just, she haven't won me over yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, little side note there.
Yeah. And then we got to our number one.
Moon Knight. No, I'm sorry, I had to drop that. I had to. You know I had to.
I know. Which is okay, right?
Because you know, once it does air, it's probably going to be my number one.
It's probably going to be your number one.
I just, you know, a little biased, but at the same time.
So far, my number one have a little bit of Wakanda in there, so I'm okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm okay with that.
And it has a little cap for me.
Has a little bit cap.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
I gave Falcon and Winter Soldier number one because of a array of just beautiful execution, right?
Agreed.
And we get to see the show starts, but we get a flashback of Endgame when Cap gives Sam the shield, right? And he tell him, he's like, it's yours. And when Cap says it's yours, there was something that Cap saw, right? Which was greatness in Sam, right? And the ability, the true ability for him to become the next Captain America. Sam hadn't seen that yet. Sam felt like the shield belonged to someone else.
Yep.
So he's like, because I feel like only Steve was worthy of this, I'm going to give this up to the museum so they can put it up as a symbol of what Steve's legacy was. Because I'm not worthy of that, right? We got to see the government now take that and give it to their poster child, right? For him to abuse it, misuse it, misrepresent what it stood for, right? Watch Sam fight for it back along with Steve's first best friend. Because they cannot have Steve's legacy be defamed the way that it was. So you watch Sam go on this journey, right, of self-recognition and realize, I am not going to let my boy's legacy be tarnished. And I am going to do whatever it is that I need to do and rise, stand and rise to that place where I need to be, right? And we watch him go through the journey, right? Talking to Carly Morgenthau and saying, there got to be another way. You shouldn't be doing it like this. Your fight is not unjust. It's righteous, right? But your methods is wrong. And her being driven by the way that they were dealt with from the blip back, right? And the way how the government treated them. And it's not when Sam gets, in the end, when he gets the suit and he flies through the window and the guy's like, who is you? And he's like, I'm Captain America. It's not that moment that he's Captain America. But it's the moment in the end of the series, right? When he saves the government and the people that matter. He saved the day.
The dignitaries.
Right?
Yeah.
And then he confronts them and tell them, listen, man, you're doing it wrong. Do better. In the moment of him facing off with the world government, he checks the world government after saving them and saying, you are doing this wrong. And they were like, well, how would you know? He was like, you don't... And it's the way that he peels off his layers, right? And keep in mind, you can't tell a true Captain America story without telling the past. And not just the past, but the hidden past, right? So if you're going to tell the story of a black Captain America, there was a black Captain America before.
Yep.
So now you have to reveal his story. And even though you didn't have enough time to see his story, you heard his story.
Yep.
Right? So you got the image set into your brain. And while you are seeing past Captain America, past black Captain America, new black Captain America, there's still a future Captain America symbol that's showcased in the very same show.
Yep.
And we got to see Eli looking at what his grandfather been through.
Yep.
Right? Listening to what Sam is saying, that's resonating with his grandfather, that's almost bringing him to tears.
Yep.
To look and be like, I think I'm going to follow in my grandfather's footsteps.
Yep.
So you see a foresight of this new potential hero. And all of these things that's weaved in there is what I thought it was just sheer genius.
Yep, I agree. And I think what was beautiful about it was the fact that the entire time he kept trying to see how he can live up to Steve, where it wasn't even that. It was this struggle for him, like, I'm never going to be Steve, where in the end, he wasn't needing to be Steve. He needed to be Captain America.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was what resonated the most with me, where it was his origin story as his own Captain America. And that was what was so beautiful.
And that's why Steve was telling him, it's yours.
Right. And that, I think, was missed by a lot of people, too, because... Remember all the frustration when the shield was handed off to the fake Captain America, and how many fans were so infuriated, and just all the comic book fans were just like, please just wait. Just wait. Just hold on.
This is supposed to happen.
This is supposed to happen, and he's playing this character so well as U.S. Agent. Like, you don't even understand, like, the acting and the actor is playing U.S. Agent so well that you're viscerally angry and sending death threats to an actor
who's just doing his job.
Who's doing his job so well that you're now mad. Yeah. And to see what's funny is that origin story. To your point, there was so many Captain America origin stories being told all simultaneously to ultimately create the next Captain America. And I think that's what was so powerful about this whole entire series. And it was done perfectly. Like, that was the one thing, is looking at that series, I can't really find anywhere where there's a hole that needs to be filled or something in the storyline where I'm like, oh, you missed this or you missed that. Than, I think you and I talked about it, where we just wanted more, and we wanted to see more things played out. And I think the one thing I personally wanted to see more play out was Isaiah Bradley's storyline to actually be visually played out a little bit more, to see him, wield that shield, to see the original, actually World War II shield being carried as a mantle by him, or in the museum actually having him have that shield
with his
suit on, not him being in army fatigues. Which was kind of strange. But even that was such a minor detail in the greater scheme of the whole entire storyline that I can't really fault it. And that's why...
For me, that was the only weak thing, was that missed opportunity where they should have put Isaiah in his Captain America suit with the shield.
Right, because the whole entire thing of that museum, I think it was in the Smithsonian, right? It was supposed to be a Smithsonian display.
Of all things Captain America.
All things Captain America, and then he put him in army fatigues. It was just like... That was kind of interesting.
You kind of missed them off.
Plus, I think that would have been such an important thing to see, especially right now with Shang-Chi and seeing a black Captain America for the first time on such a grand scheme, on such a big platform.
Yeah.
That would have been important just to see the original as well, and seeing the juxtaposition of Steve carrying that original shield, but also seeing Isaiah, for people who aren't familiar with the original comic book run,
yeah.
and seeing that play out. So that probably is the only thing, and that to me is not much when you start looking at it.
When you start looking at it, the grand scheme of things.
So yeah, in the also the gravity and the tone, I think, of that series was just so serious, and it kind of had that same tone as to my all-time favorite MCU film, which was Cap 2.
Yeah.
It just felt real.
Yeah.
And when
it was
films,
grounded.
It was grounded, right? And when films or series have that tone, and it's still a comic book series, it just hits differently, right? And I think that's why I had to put that one at number one. It was a grounded story that could literally take place right now, and you're like, oh, that literally could happen, and I could see this play out, and these are all characters that are realistic. Granted, I know he was flying around with, Wakandan tech, but we're not going to overlook that too much.
Somebody came to me and they was like, well, what do you think of, his suit and his wings? Do you think his suit was bulletproof? I was like, I honestly thought, I would have loved to see Carly shoot him and the bullet hit his suit and drop on the ground.
Yeah.
Right? Because the Wakandans have found a way to weave vibranium into their costumes.
Yeah.
So I would have loved to seen that, but we didn't get that. I felt like because Sam had just gotten his new suit, even though he was pretty savvy with his wings, the next time we see him, he'll be way better with his wings. Because as much things as his wings is now doing, right? I felt like his wings responded like shadow physics, right? So all he have to do is think about what he wants it to do. Like, for instance, he saves the guy out of the helicopter and he comes down and he realizes the helicopter is coming down. He holds up the shield and his wings automatically encases and wraps around. He creates that vibranium dome. And I remember pausing and taking a photo of that exact, what it looked like, right? And you see the shield and then the colors of the wings, which is the American colors with the star to the very top of it. And I was like, Malcolm, what is his name? Can't remember his last name, the director for Falcon and Winter Soldier. I said he did an amazing job with just that scene where he saves the day, he comes down, boom, people clapping, whatever, he takes off, flies back up, right? The one guy's like, hey, that's Black Falcon. He's like, no, that's Captain America.
Yeah.
It's in the midst of him saving the day, he's literally becoming Captain America.
Yep.
There was also elements of this show that was amazing. We got to see the Dora Milaje do what the Dora Milaje do.
When they came in, my God.
And they broke the fake Captain America. They broke him.
He never had a chance.
He didn't have a chance. You literally saw in his face that he was broken, and he said they weren't even super soldiers.
Yeah.
And that, I was like, I was all in my feelings. Now, as such a big lover of Black Panther, I have watched Dora Milaje do these things, right? Fight a certain way, work as this unit, right? And I saw that on television. And I was like, oh my gosh. We got to see Zemo come back, right?
In a whole different light, too,
Yes.
right? Which was great.
But here's the thing, what I loved about Zemo in this show was there was so much elements and moving pieces that Zemo had in place. Even down to the last set of super soldiers that got killed. Zemo Butler was the one who executed that plan, right? And him and Zemo had already talked. Zemo was in jail at that point, right? But we heard in the end, and I think you and I talked about this, or I might have talked about this on a podcast with Catano and Reese. I said, I believe there is a Da Vinci always had a wingman, right? I forgot what his wingman was called, but it was two of them, right? And the book that Zemo is reading in the prison, the first time when Bucky goes in to see him is the book, right? And I remember saying in a podcast, I said, I bet you Zemo was working with someone. And it turned out that Zemo was actually working with Valentina because she says it. She's like, I guess Zemo was right all along. And he's like, that was the person who she was working with
at the time. And you got to see his comic book costume too.
You got to finally see it, you know.
And they did a good job with it too.
That whole scene in Madripoor.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Like, oh, yes.
Oh my gosh. When they walking through, you see the what is it called? The bar that Wolverine used to hang out in all the time. Was it a Princess Bar?
My gosh.
The bar in Madripoor, man.
Yeah.
I think it's a Princess Bar.
Princess. Now we're on the spot and
can't think of what it is, right? But we got to see the bronze monkey and all of that, right?
Yep.
All of that stuff is in the comics over in Madripoor,
yep.
right? So we get to see what Madripoor looks like,
right?
And the operation of it, right? And it's like it's a crime-infested place. That crime is how how the economy thing works over there in Madripoor,
right?
You know, and it was just great seeing that now. Sam have to go in there and pretend to be someone else, right? Bucky have to revert back to the Winter Soldier.
Yep.
So Zemo is like, yo, stick to your role. And he says, get ready, Winter Soldier. And dude puts his hand on him, and he says what he says, and Winter Soldier just goes in. And you hear the screech. The same screech that you hear in the first Captain America movie where he falls off the train.
Yep.
The same screech you hear in the very end, right? Where Bucky falls off the thing when he goes over the top and he comes down, and the guy comes down and he puts up his hand and blocks it, right?
Yeah.
You hear all these little things and you see all these little nods where you see Captain America and you're watching how little things is passing on to the next Captain America.
And we've been focusing a lot on Captain America, and we didn't even touch on Bucky.
Not yet.
Which is crazy, right? Like,
because he went through his own journey.
That's how good this series was. And we didn't even touch on how amazing the storyline that we got with Bucky, right? Yeah. Like, to see the struggle that he's had to go through and the recovery that he's had to go through. And make amends. And just to see him to try to assimilate into normal society and just see what he's trying to do to try to fix what his mental struggle is on a daily basis. And man, how rough was that when you put everything together and seeing that his daily stop where he's going in and visiting who he's visiting are people he's daily affected in his life and were targets at one point, and you're just like, oh my god, like to be able to just function is insane on a daily level to be Bucky. Like, wow.
There were moments where Sam and him would hold each other up, right? But they would check them. They would check the other one to give them like that rude awakening that they needed. Yeah. And the last conversation that they had, Sam said to Bucky, "Do the work. Crawl out of the trench. Yeah. You're gonna have to get dirty, but you gotta do the work." And after they say goodbye for that moment, you watch Sam put in the work. You watch Bucky went back and put in the work.
And you know what's interesting too is you could almost see how each of them needed Steve and how each of them filled the role of not having Steve for each other, right? And that was also really interesting to watch because each of them didn't have Steve anymore.
They didn't.
And they had to get through this whole entire new situation in this new world without Steve.
Sam says it. He said, Steve is gone.
Yeah. Right? So, again, it's crazy how much was put into such a short amount of episodes. Yeah. But of the series, because we were ranking them, that's why this one ranks so high. And it's just so well done.
I was overwhelmed with feelings in the episode where it started off with them fighting Walker and taking the shield.
Yeah.
Right? And the two of Captain America's best friends now have to take down this guy who's defaming their friend.
Yeah.
And his legacy.
Yeah.
And it's minutes after he just commits murder.
Yeah.
Right? And
holding the one thing that represents what's left
of Steve.
Steve, right?
And there's a moment where when they win, right, and they got the shield back, Bucky walks over to Sam and he drops it in front of Sam. And he gives him that look like, Steve gave you this, you give it away, and this is what happened to it. I'm putting it back in your hand. Do not screw it up again this time, right? And you see Sam got his suit damaged, and he gets up and he's wiping the blood off as if you tarnish my friend.
Right.
And you watching that struggle. Like, I went back and watched that, and I was like, wow. Like, you watch him as he's wiping the blood off the shield. You know, like,
and
I have to
visual
clean this
too.
up.
How up until that point, how many times have you seen blood on the shield?
Yeah.
Granted, in the comics, you see it every now and then, right? But in the MCU, when have you seen blood on Cap's shield?
Never.
Right? And to see that contrast on that shield, it was a lot to see, right? And like the episode ends that way, and you're just like, oh,
yeah.
And to your that was rough to see, and that moment was a heavy moment, and I think that kind of just was like, oh wow, yeah. I have to do something about this, right?
They were not afraid of making you uncomfortable, right? Even down to the race topic and what they did to Isaiah.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like, no self-respecting black man would want to be Captain America. I need to be no poster, blonde hair, blue eye. And then you hear Sam in the speech that he's giving him, right? And he was like, don't you think that I feel the judgment? I feel the stares now. But I'm standing here, man. Just save the day. No blonde hair, no blue eyes.
Yeah.
I'm here. Just me.
Yeah.
Right? And it's in that moment, they do a flash to Isaiah's face. Because Isaiah is feeling it, right? His grandson is watching his father be emotional. The world is watching Sam on the television check the government. And it's like, we even got hit with the Lamar getting killed, right? And Harley's like, well, I wasn't worrying about him because he didn't matter to my thing, my cause. And even though fake Captain America has been so cruddy up until the moment, he says, you don't think that his life mattered, right? And even though they didn't say it out loud, it's like black lives do matter, man. Right? And they were not afraid to ruffle people's feathers and say, listen, this is something that's going on in the climate of America.
Right.
You know, and man, it struck at so many chords and hit so many feelings, and oh man, it was just beautifully executed. Yeah. And that why I give him my number one.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And then to finish off and to leave what it set up possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, Thunderbolts, right? Like,
Thunderbolts or Dark Avengers.
Or Dark Avengers, either way. Like, and then we have Isaiah Bradley's son, so we have another Young Avenger.
Another Young Avenger.
I mean,
at this point, all the main characters from the Young Avengers, we have seen them except for one, and it's Hulking.
Yeah.
Right? We haven't seen Teddy yet.
Yeah.
But we saw Billy and Tommy.
Yep.
We've seen Kate Bishop.
Yep.
We've seen Eli Bradley.
Yep.
We've seen...
I mean, we have Zemo. And
yeah, but Zemo isn't part of the Young Avengers. He's part of the Dark Avengers.
Dark Avengers.
Yeah.
Well, you said Dark Avengers are...
No, I was talking about Young Avengers.
That's right. Yep.
And we've seen Cassie Lang.
Yep. That's true.
So the only one missing right now is Teddy. We have also seen the little boy from Iron Man 3, Harley, as an older teenager.
Right.
What if he takes the place as Iron Lad? Now the circle is complete. Right.
I mean, we have Kang in there, so...
And what if Iron Lad is a variant of Kang, but we just don't know?
Right. I mean, that would be true to the comics.
In Loki, we see Kang Technologies, the building, but it's the old Avengers building.
Right.
So the question is, did old boy have it purged from the timeline, right? Because of that variant.
We'll find out, right?
Marvel, man, is genius at playing the long game.
Yeah.
They are amazing at it. And the way how Rebellious Minds himself, Raw, from the Raw Hype Show, was talking to me on the phone. And I said to him, I think that they have it mapped out 10 years down the road, maybe 20. And he was like, really? I was like, think about it. They already have started crafting phase 5 and 6, right? And it's because they play the long game.
Mm-hmm.
So a long time ago, maybe 5-10 years ago, they had already draw out of the board that they were going to do a Hawkeye show where they were going to introduce Kate Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to do a WandaVision show where they were going to introduce the kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen Cassie in the Ant-Man movies,
Mm-hmm.
right? We see her be older in Endgame.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things, they've been playing this long game. And I'm like, if you play this long game, you plan out way ahead.
Yeah.
So you can find a way to execute because you're playing chess.
I mean, every Marvel property, going back to even the original MCU films, it's always like, here's a character and here's a nugget. And then the nugget's there. Let's not call it a nugget, let's call it a seed. And then the seed's there, then the seed's planted, right? Mm-hmm. And then that seed slowly grows over the course of whatever film shows, and all of a sudden that little seed was like, oh yeah, that is this main thread into the whatever next series or film, and then that film has another seed, and then that grows into another forest and continues and blossoms into everything else. So that's just going to keep happening. And it's an amazing thing because there's no way, and it's a beautiful thing, there's no way with how many comics there are that they're ever going to catch up, because my friend, they are still being written to this day, and I'm still reading them right now, and they're never going to catch up where the comics are and the shows are, because you and I know the timeline of where the MCU is at right now and where the comics are like literally eons apart. So
there's times I am talking to Katano and Codename, right? And I said, don't you remember this scene, right? And most of the time Katana's like, no, I don't. I'm like, because you watch it for the enjoyment. Right? I watch it for the enjoyment first, and then I go back in and I watch it again and look at things. Right? And if we go all the way back to Iron Man 3, Iron Man 2, right? You got a nod of Wakanda in Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2 was in phase 1. We didn't get Wakanda until phase 3, right? I was like, Iron Man 2 also had a nugget planted in that very same scene for Namor the Submariner.
But what about the 10 rings? Like, if you want to start going back the nuggets,
the first Iron Man, the 10 rings is in there, but it's not until Shang-Chi in phase 4.
Like, what a freaking seed.
And honestly understand about the 10 rings.
Right. Like, that's a long game if you want to talk about a long game. Yeah. So, we've got, strap in, we've got a long road ahead. You know, it's that big canvas, right? And the canvas is never ending. And they started painting here with Iron Man. And they keep putting little things in there, right? And as a movie happened, they continue painting, right? And then when you get over here with the shows and Hawkeye and everything in phase 4 and Shang-Chi and all those amazing things, and we see Eternals and all of that, we realize there's this beautiful tapestry of art. But the artist is still going in and painting. And then we get something like Spider-Man No Way Home. And it's like mind blown. Right?
Right?
And then you realize, oh, this tapestry is actually connected to 4 other paintings that you forgot about
and
from
then when you bring
years
those
ago.
4 paintings, you're like, wait a minute. Right? And you can't talk about these other paintings without talking about other entities, other properties. You know, X-Men, Fantastic Four. In Loki, we're talking about variants now, right? So in other multiverses, there's these variants. And we've seen some of these other variants, but now we're going to watch what's happening in the MCU with those versions of the variants. And if we are not careful, we're going to get a Secret Wars.
Don't say we're not careful. Let's make it happen.
Right? Because the branches are spreading, right? The multiverses is colliding, and there's all this story to tell. It is leading somewhere. We can't see. Have you seen Eternals yet?
I have.
We can't see what have happened in Eternals and cannot fathom what Galactus looks like, because now we know what Galactus can look like.
Yep.
We know what a celestial being looks
Arishem
like.
kind of looked already the coloration of Galactus. I was like, he kind of looks like Galactus. I think that's a little intentional. And then, by the way, did you notice he had some battle damage on him?
Yep.
I was like, what was Arishem getting into? All these other Celestials are a little too clean, and he's a little beat up.
Most of them are, because we have the severed head of Nowhere.
That's true.
That's the head of a dead Celestial.
Which, in comics, Gore the God Butcher chopped that head off, right? So you think we're going to have a connection in the Thor, the next Thor film?
With him and the head of Nowhere, I don't think so.
No? Mm-mm. Okay.
But in the Thor film, I definitely think that we're going to be seeing Gore kill gods, and they're going to be talking about past gods that died. So it's a very close possibility that they could do that, right?
Okay. I was just wondering, because I was like, hey, that's interesting. You might see it now at this point, because Eternals is like, here's all the Celestials. So.
Especially if he's using the Necro Sword.
Right.
Right? And we've seen the swords that Hela was going around killing people with. Look like it could have been a Necro Sword.
Yeah.
It's a great way to tell a story that Hela and Odin came into where his folks are, and Hela killed everybody. And he's found one of her swords.
Yeah.
Picked it up and forged it into the Necro Sword. And because that was so long ago, he could have went after Nowhere, cut the head off.
Cut the head off. It's true.
I don't like the fact that they have Ego the Living Planet as a Celestial. I don't like it. I don't like the fact he's Peter Quill Daddy. That's just me.
You and I are... No, that's not just you. That's you and I. The same
I very much dislike that.
That's another topic. So.
But in Eternals, we got to see... who's it? What's his name? Jemiah the Analyzer? What's the Analyzer name? I think it's Jemiah the Analyzer.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because you got Jemiah, you have the one that was coming out of Earth's core was... Tiamat. You had Arishem the Judge. You have...
They showed quite a few.
Isan the Searcher.
Yeah.
To remember the names of all the Celestials is
it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we saw Isan the Searcher back in Guardians. First Guardians. In the little globe, he was telling the story.
Yep.
Yeah. So where is he at?
Right. He's gonna have to pop up again, right?
Somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
I love the fact...
Again, there's another seed that was planted, right? Yeah. We saw him randomly in Guardians, and you did not see him again until Celestials.
I pointed that out to Kitana. I was like, do you not remember Isan the Searcher being in Guardians? We got to see a Celestial. He was like, no, I don't remember. I was like, hey, he's right there.
Yeah.
I was like, he's like, yeah, I don't... I was like, all right. Yeah. Frustrated the crap out of me on that podcast. You know, it was hilarious. But, nevertheless, he don't remember it. I'm like, how could you not? It's such a crucial part of the story.
And they did keep the look of the Celestials identical to, which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
For how long the time frame in between Guardians and Eternals was.
Yeah.
So.
And I love the design. One of the things that I pointed out to them is, the 6, and then the 4,
and then the 2. Yeah.
Right. And that was one of the arguments that I had with Codename Comet and Katana, because they were trying to tell me that Thanos was a deviant. I'm like, no, he was an Eternal with a deviant gene.
Deviant genes, yeah.
Right? The Eternals have 2 eyes. He was just mutated a little bit, and he had purple skin with a little screwed up looking chin.
The
but
deviant
he was
syndrome. Yeah.
He was still an Eternal.
Yeah.
He was not a deviant. And some people have messaged in and they've talked about that. It was like, yeah, you were right and they were wrong. But
check the comics.
Yeah. But they came at me sideways. It's all good. I let them have it. They wanted to have it, whatever. They still didn't win the argument, but I was like, whatever.
It happens. It's okay.
Happens. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay.
But I think what they're doing now is great. Mm-hmm. And I think everything has a purpose.
So does this lead us to the next portion of the conversation with what's about to happen?
Yes. So we're going into Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
Right? And especially coming off of No Way Home, we're gonna get to see variants, and we're gonna get to see a lot of crazy things.
We're gonna see some tentacled beasts.
Yes. And there was an article that came out, and they said that they're changing the name, and I don't know if they're changing the name based on.
I guess there's some copyright issues because apparently a Lego toy came out. Yeah. I'm sure you saw that, right? Like there's a Lego toy that came out, and it did not have the traditional name.
It didn't. Yeah. The name of the character that was using is in the Marvel universe. Right?
Right, but it's not.
But it's not the same character.
The same character.
Now, I don't know if they're going with that character because they're leading somewhere, right? Because the character is the identical look of the Shumagara, right? Mm-hmm. I've been talking about it. You've been talking about it. Codename have been talking about it, and so on. And we got to see the creature. And we're like, whoa! But then the name is Gargantos from the Lego toy, right? And Gargantos is a whole different character in the Marvel universe that has a huge portion to deal with Namor. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if that's why we got to see water in the Sanctorum, right? Because that would be an interesting way of introducing Namor, right? Especially if he's the villain for the Wakanda Forever movie, right? No one knows because Marvel haven't made the announcement yet and so on. They're still filming and all that great stuff. But outside of that, it's Shumagara that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how powerful they're going to make him.
Which we have already seen in What If.
Yeah, right? And I'm wondering if they're going to scale it back a bit.
Interesting.
Because, honestly speaking, they scaled back Thanos and the children of Thanos. Yeah. Right? I think the only one that they got right was Obsidian, but in the comics, his name is Black Dwarf, right? Mm-hmm. He did get defeated in Wakanda. He was the only child of Thanos that got defeated in the comics. So I think they have to scale it back because it's Disney. Yeah. Right. Same thing for a lot of the deaths and the killings or whatever on there. The way how they have to make it seem because it's Disney. But who knows? I think we're gonna get to see Wanda cut up and show her.
They have said this is going to be one of the most darkest films to come out. They said this is going to be borderline a horror film, which I'm really excited about, by the way. Okay. And that it is going to be on the supernatural side of things. Okay. So this might push the boundaries that we haven't seen before. Maybe. So I personally think it might be maybe the darkest film we've seen yet in the MCU.
Hands down, yeah. Because I don't think we've honestly gotten anything dark yet.
No, we really haven't. Everything, I mean, there has been some dark moments. We have seen, some heroes pass. We have seen some very traumatizing moments. But I don't think we've seen anything live in a supernatural realm. I don't think we've seen anything truly full. The Doctor Strange film was maybe the closest thing where we got to see, I would say, a glimpse of what could be a supernatural film. But even that, he was still coming into his own, right? We're gonna have to deal with Scarlet Witch being full Scarlet Witch. We're gonna
and that's not gonna be pretty.
No, and then we're gonna see a Stephen Strange dealing with a dark version of Stephen Strange. Which, what are we gonna call this version of Stephen?
Okay, I have a theory. Me and my crazy antics of looking at trailers more than once. Mm-hmm. I went back and looked at the trailer a few more times. Okay. I don't know if I want to use the word few, but. For the sake of people not calling.
For his definition of few is probably 50, 60 times.
No, I don't think that much.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you just look at a quick glance of the trailer, it looks like you're dealing with two Doctor Stranges, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I saw 4.
Uh-oh.
I saw 4.
Uh-oh.
So, I saw...
Are they...
Our Doctor Strange.
Okay. Do you think they're all Steven, though?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think it's almost like a situation from Spider-Man and there's just Stevens popping through now?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I also think if we are not careful, we might get other Sorcerers Supremes in that show. Mm-mm. But in the midst of me watching it, right, we all saw the one where the one says things just got out of hand, right? He looks dark. Mm-hmm. He looked like he could be Strange Supreme, right? But Strange Supreme is the one in the What If.
So I'm gonna do the same thing you did to me. Have you seen where literally verbatim the what if actual Doctor Strange and from the trailer are saying the same thing, and the clips side by side are almost simultaneous as well, which I thought was very interesting because Marvel doesn't do anything by accident. So why would the scenes be shot for shot? So
I saw 2 more Doctor Stranges.
Okay.
One of them had the tentacles coming out of his hand in the very same trailer.
Okay.
And it was not the same one who spoke.
Interesting.
I also saw another Doctor Strange that is the Secret Defender's Defender Strange.
Oh.
With the ponytail.
Okay.
If you go back and you watch the trailer, there's a scene where you see him flipping around.
Yeah.
And if you pause it just right, you'll see that it's Doctor Strange with the ponytail.
Okay.
And he's wearing, his clothing is different.
Okay.
Bruh, like
Alright, so I'm gonna have homework after this.
Yeah.
Definitely gonna have to go back and watch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the movie I was most excited to see way back, and I'm still extremely excited to see. And I'm just counting down the months before we get it.
I mean, I think I'm right there in the same boat because other than Moon Knight, I think the only other thing is, multiverse madness. I just have a thing for the supernatural, man. It's something about it.
Because Marvel is playing ball with Sony, I believe we've heard the voice, right?
Yep.
Of what is his name? Is it Eric Vanderpool, aka Blade?
Blade. Yep.
Right. We heard his voice in the end of Eternals. I believe we're going to see him in Morbius, post-credit scene or end scene.
We have to.
We have to because we've seen the way that they are playing ball, right? Mm-hmm. We now know that Blade is in the MCU, right? But the world that the MCU resides in is the same world that Adrian Toomes reside in. And we saw our Peter put him in jail, right? In the trailer, we see Adrian Toomes in the trailer. And he's like, let's keep in contact, Doctor, right? I believe we see Blade either hot on the trail of Morbius because he hears about him, or in the end, Morbius does something that redeems himself and Blade is standing in the cut watching him and it goes off.
That would be a perfect setup for Blade.
Perfect setup.
Yeah.
And if it happens, you heard it here first.
Again, an exclusive, right?
So
we've had multiple exclusives.
We have, man. Marvel, go ahead and cut the check, please.
Yeah, right.
All right. Make sure you get my spelling of my name correct. Thank you. But no, just if you start lining everything up in the way how things have been executed and knowing the way they do stuff and the game of chess that they plays, I think they're doing an amazing job. And Phase 4 is my favorite phase thus far because simply of the costume design. From the time Phase 4 has started.
That's it, just the costumes. He doesn't care about the storyline.
Listen, man.
Doesn't care about anything else.
I've already given my props to Sarah Finn on her casting choices. I've already given my props to whoever the directors are that's writing these amazing stories. Everything we got on Disney Plus as far as shows was amazing, right? But just how they are able to take exactly what you look like in the comics, right? And in Phase 1, 2, and 3, we saw them making adjustment and trying to find themselves. And now, in Phase 4, they are fully integrated in bringing that comic book version to life.
I mean,
it's just genius.
Even down to Hawkeye's purple garb, I was like, oh my god, they nailed it.
They did.
Captain America's garb with the wings, perfect.
They did.
Every single time.
Everything. Man.
It's just like, no, they're not going to be able to do it. Oh my god, they did it.
Yeah.
The classic Loki was spot on.
The Kingpin.
The Kingpin was spot on. And just like, and then
what U.S. agent wears when he walks out, and he's like, "Hey, I love it. Yeah. It's black." It's the exact same thing. Like I'm like, oh,
every single time.
Yeah. So knowing that all of that is happening, seeing all of that happening, knowing that they have stuff coming like Secret Invasion, right?
Scrolls
and
are
when
coming.
you think about it, you like, as long as the Skrulls have been on Earth. Like, wait a minute.
Here's you want to talk about some Easter egg seeds that have been planted. How many of the characters that we think are humans that we've been seeing play out in all these shows and all these movies, how many of those are you gonna pop up and be scrolls that are just gonna flip out?
I think, however they do it, they're gonna have to do it a way where we can't tell.
Okay.
Right. Even down to the end of the Hawkeye series, when he gives her back the watch and she flips it over and you see the 19, you lost it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh my gosh, that's Bobby Morse.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody who have read the comics for a period of time know that Mockingbird was Agent 19.
Yeah.
So to see that, you're like, okay, she used her name Laura because it's her middle name, Bobby L. Morse. Laura, but then she got married to Hawkeye. But if they go to Secret Invasion story, in the comics, he holds an arrow to her head and he's like, tell me something that only you and I would know. Mm-hmm. And she tells him about the baby they lost on the date that they lost the baby because both of them were broken over the child that she lost. Mm-hmm. Came to find out she was actually a Skrull. Mm-hmm. Because when they do the blood oath and they morph into you, they not only take on your parents, but they take on your memories. So I want to know how they're going to do it.
The other thing I was thinking is going to an Eternals reference. Do you remember when Kingo shows up with his assistant and they see the deviant that's dead on the ground? And Kingo's assistant is like, ooh, it's beautiful. Skrulls are a deviant, part of the deviant race, right? They're like an offshoot. Why would he think it's so beautiful? So I'm thinking, like, these little subtle characters that we've loved in all these different movies and shows, why wouldn't Kingo's assistant just be, like, a random Skrull, like, just thrown in there? Like, that's what I'm thinking. It's like all these characters that are just thrown in here.
And why is Kingo Valet thinking that he's a vampire and try to stake him through the heart?
Right?
Do you know about vampires? Where have you been to know about vampires? Because people is not thinking that vampires are real.
Yeah, and vampires have like this theme that keep popping up over and over again. So I don't know. It's just interesting that with Secret Invasion, now that we know it's on the horizon, I'm going back and watching certain things. I'm like, hey, you might be a Skrull. You might be a Skrull.
And to hear the word vampires, first time we heard the word vampires was in Loki.
Yeah.
Right. We hear the word vampires again in Eternals, and then the second post-credit scene is that of Blade talking. Right?
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, there's this connection. So it only makes sense that Morbius is coming. Blade is going to pop out in the cut. We heard him before, right? But we didn't see him. I believe now we get a quick glimpse. Maybe it's the back of his head or the silhouette of him or whatever. And then him and Dane Whitman, a.k.a. the Black Knight, is on this mission cutting down vampires. I wouldn't be surprised. It would be amazing.
I'm excited for that.
Midnight Suns is coming.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I mean, we got the pieces.
The Midnight Suns have fought against Dracula, the head of the vampires, man, Vlad himself. They've also fought against Lilith. There's a lot of things that's going down the pipeline, and I cannot wait to see what Marvel does.
I'm right there with you, man.
So it's gonna be great, man. Listen, I had a great time. This was one of the best casts I've ever had. This was so great just to sit here and chop it up with you, Katano. No disrespect, bro. I love you. You know how we do it.
Hopefully we can get the group back together.
It's been a minute,
right?
Been a minute. We gotta get the squad back together, man. I'm gonna get the squad back together for a big epic show.
Okay.
I'm moving the lair to a bigger space.
Okay.
Right. So once everything is set up, we'll have the squad come in and we can just chop it.
I'm glad you could come into my lair for a little bit.
It's always a blast being in
definitely. There. And Moon Knight's gonna be the best show moving forward. So number 1 is Moon Knight, even though it's not even out yet. It says number 1.
You heard it here first. All right. But in the meantime, man, it was good being here. I had a good time. Just glad seeing you, brother.
Same.
This is your boy Tchallabpp74, and we gone. Bye-bye.
A.P.A.C.